So 30th of the 11th, 2024, and there are very many F1 threads at which we need to pull. Shall we get techier than techie things? Two topics up on the docket this morning before we get ourselves a sprint race later on this afternoon. Lewis Hamilton, we got to talk about it because he said some things that were almost self-hating. Talking about he's lost his speed, that I'm just slow. So too, we've got to talk about Lando Norris, who's had some things, very disparaging things, to say about one four-time champion, Max Verstappen. Let's talk about Lando first. I was watching Lando Norris, and again, you know my problem with Lando season today, erstwhile, has been that he's an incredible driver. You forgive me for waxing lyrical about the chap for a second. No one can take away this dude's pace in absolute terms, for he has that in buckets, ladies and gentlemen. Buckets. Seriously, go back and watch his qualifying lap yesterday in the sprint shootout or whatever they're calling it. In Q3, that dude's sector 2 was absolutely god tier. Literally, if he covered up his helmet and you superimposed via Photoshop or something else Red Bull livery on that car, you'd be forgiven for thinking that that was Maximilian Verstappen in that car. All of the character traits were there. Geometric racing line, maximising each and every single turn, not leaving even a millisecond of lap time on the table. Go watch his turn 8, turn 9, turn 10. Sector 2 was absolutely incredible. Reminiscent of Maximilian Verstappen's qualifying lap at Austria even. He has this ability to be subtle in the car and put it where it needs to be. He's just a different level when he's had his Weetabix. Turn 8, turn 9, turn 10. The way he sets himself up so beautifully. Geometric racing line settings, maximising the entry onto turn 9 and presents the car perfectly, as the least that he can physically off of the car into turn 10. It was a beautiful section and it shows in his time. The only person on that track that even got close, notwithstanding George Russell, first of his name's god tier lap, was on one Oscar Jack Piastri, and even he wasn't that close. Sector 2 shows everything you need to know about Lando Norris's speed, but then the Jekyll and Hyde that dude is, you fear for him with King George Russell behind him going into the sprint race today. If I were a betting man, there's no way that I'm betting that Lando Norris is going to make it through to turn 1 in first, because he doesn't consolidate pole. 7 times out of 8 he's dropped it on pole and not made it through to the end of the lap in first. Doesn't do the defensive posture thing very well. Doesn't accelerate through the gears nor dial in the appropriate level of RPM to nail the launch. This is something that Lando Norris needs to continuously improve. Have an open and honest conversation with himself in the accountability mirror and fix for these ills. Sack off the social media like my mate Peter Windsor said, friend of the channel. Delete all of his accounts. Delete all of the FI press conferences. Take the fines, because he needs to dial in and become that dude each and every single time. Sector 2, Lando Norris, is as near as makes no difference unbeatable. And then he goes and does this. Then he goes and says something like this, because of course Maximilian Verstappen, we are diatribing for the season that was now, and Max Verstappen has come out and said that if it had the McLaren or the Ferrari, things wouldn't have been too dissimilar to what they ended up being. Genius, you're 11 legends. L8 self-deprecating himself again, unked it up. We'll get to it, Genius. I've got some things to say because I'm not too pleased at these Lewis Hamilton comments, but far too kind as always. Here's what Max said. Had it been the Ferrari, things would have been similar, but I still would have won the championship in that Scuderia Ferrari SF24 iteration. However, if it had been McLaren, I would have wrapped up this season long before now, because they've had the quickest car ostensibly for the vast majority of the latter half of the season. And I believe Max Verstappen is right here. McLaren have been dominant in the second half. Yeah, it was the first half belonged to Red Bull. Of course it does. We saw the way that Max Verstappen was driving. But that being said, there were a very many travails as far as the handling dynamic of that car. Many people say that the true barometer of what Red Bull's car is capable of, that you see that in the hands of Checo Perez. And where has that dude been? Again, Max Verstappen has outqualified him 49 of the last 50 qualifying sessions, and that shows you the making of the man, just who and where and how Maximilian manages to get it done so often, so frequently, so much of the time as a proportion of the whole. Here's what Lando Norris responded though. He said Maximilian Verstappen, if he thinks he could jump into a McLaren and have won the championship before he did, he's having a laugh. Norris though confesses that he did make some mistakes this season. I mean, state the obvious, Sherlock, do you know what I mean? No kidding, mate, just a few, chap. But anyway, he continues, and I quote verbatim, Max has to do all of the work, the testing, the setup on his own. Hats off to him. He doesn't have somebody who's pushing him. He doesn't have somebody in the other car who's trying other things. The data's not as valuable, therefore. But at the same time, the equal and opposite of that is that he doesn't have the pressure that an Oscar Jack Piastri will apply to you in the other car. And with that comes a semblance of comfort. I agree with Lando Norris, but he doubles down as Lando likes to sometimes, right? This is why he's a social media Donny. This is why Lando Norris, some aficionados argue, needs to get his helmet on, pull his visor down and blank out all of the noise. Ensure that fades to black. Because but for that approach, he's going to keep coming out with things like this and he will be quoted. Here's what he said about Maximilian Verstappen's assertion that had he had a papaya coloured car, that the season would have been wrapped up ages ago. Lando Norris said, and I quote, he should start doing comedy, should Max, or something of that ilk. He can say whatever he wants. Of course, I completely disagree, as I would. He's good, is Max Verstappen. But yeah, that's not true. Lando, why are you even wading in these waters? Mate, you've got no right. So this reminds me of the Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort when the fella fought the brilliant sporting endeavour. This was Lando Norris at his best, gapping Max Verstappen substantially to the tune of 20 to 30 seconds. Yeah, notwithstanding the car, and he had the wheels underneath him that time to do that. But yet and still, he's got to execute for that. It was a brilliant showing from Lando Norris then. Post-race, he goes and spoils it. Talking the talk before he walks the walk in long form, over a longer period of time, consistently. You remember, Lando Norris said, simply lovely, borrowing the Maximilian Verstappen term. Now, Lando Norris, is not the time for banter. How, ladies and gentlemen, has that banter aged from Lando Norris? Lest we forget that the gap in the standings is 64 points between Lando Norris and McLaren. People have calculated, some aficionados say, they've given away 63 points over the course of championship by virtue of their mistakes. Please see Hungary switcheroo with Oscar Jack Piastri, the failure to double stack at Silverstone as an example, the crash at Austria. They have been mistake PLC all bloody season. 63 points they've given away. And again, if you talk about how many points Max Verstappen has gained because of those points given away, those mistakes, anywhere up to 24 points, some aficionados calculate. That's a grand total of 87 points. Flip reverse that, and you have Lando Norris ahead in a championship to the tune of 23 points. That's what we're talking about. And that's why Lando Norris, for me, needs to keep his mouth shut. You have no place bantering or even disagreeing with one Maximilian Verstappen, because he's a four-time champion. You, Lando Norris, have yourself nothing to speak of, and you should do, because nobody can argue in good faith that you're not good enough. You are brilliant. You only need to go and watch Sector 2 back, as I have done a gazillion times between now and last night, and see how good that dude is in the car. Subtlety of inputs, maximising the geometric racing line, nailing the curve, presenting the car into turn 10 through your entry into turn 8. This is 4D chess, right? Check in 4 moves. Like he's God tier. Is Lando Norris, and nobody can argue different. Just point them at Exhibit A, which of course is Sector 2 last night. He's brilliant, but he just has this thing that he's missing for. There is a gap in his analysis going forward. Charles Leclerc chimed in and agrees with one Maximilian Verstappen. He said as following: Max Verstappen is a very special driver. What makes him special is the confidence that he has. But I think it's very difficult to say something like what Max said. without even knowing what the car is like to drive. He's an incredible driver, no doubt. Whether he would have made it or not in the 2024 Ferrari, the SF24, I don't know. I don't know how the Red Bull is to drive. I don't know how the McLaren is, says Charles Leclerc, aka modern day Jean Alesi. He doesn't know how the Ferrari is to drive, nor how he would adapt to that. So therefore, Charles Leclerc bookends. I think it's a stretch to say something like that. Fair play, Charles Leclerc. I'll take that from Charles Leclerc more than I'll take it from Lando Norris, because Charles hasn't had the car to compete with Max Verstappen for the vast portion of this season. Lando Norris, however, has. Oh, by the way, Lewis Hamilton has come out and said some things, hasn't he? It's techie. Lando should dump social media, says Joanna. Abso-flipping-lutely. Don't know if Checo is good barometer of what Red Bull. I know we might be. Rafa, you make the point. Go on, let's nail Lewis Hamilton quickly, because I don't know. Actually, I do know how I feel about this. I hate it. Here's what Lando Norris said, and I'll tell you how I react to it. He said that I'm just slow. He was asked about qualifying and what happened, and he said, well, I'm just slow. I'm just slow. It's the same thing at every qualifying session. I am just slow. Behave yourself, Lewis Hamilton. You know what he sounds like? You know those kids at school that are brilliant artists, paint like Leonardo da Vinci. And when you ask them what they think about their painting, they do one of these, well, no, it's rubbish. I've made lots of mistakes. Meanwhile, they're painting the Mona Lisa. No, you are fishing for compliments here. I understand your confidence and your momentum might be low, Sir Lewis, but stop that. You're a big 39, soon to be 40-year-old man. So here's what happened. I will help you out, Lewis, if you don't understand. Your mistakes keep coming in the latter stages of the qualifying lap. Yesterday, you nailed George Russell in Sector 1. You were quicker than him. Sector 2, however, you lost yourself 1.5 tenths. Sector 3, you lost yourself 2 tenths. This is the same story. Don't believe me? Exhibit A, Bahrain qualifying final turn. That's where you lost all your time. Sector 3 yet again. Canada, same thing. And again, you had the opportunity. You were set to go purple, fastest of all, but you lost it into the wall of champions. Australian Grand Prix, you lost all your time in qualifying, turn 13 to 14. Same story again. Chinese Grand Prix, turn 14, you ran wide. Same thing again. Italian Grand Prix, you lost all your time at the Ascari chicane. The penultimate one, same thing again. US Grand Prix, turn 12, you missed the apex in qualifying. Same thing again. What are we doing here? If past his prologue, then Lewis Hamilton isn't slow. This is nonsense. You are unreliable narrator if you say such a thing. What Lewis is having problems with is, of course, the combination of this very mercurial set of compound, these tyres, in combination with an aerodynamically sensitive specification of a car. Over the course of a qualifying lap, a hot lap even, you need to manage your tyres. You can't extract 100% of the tax as far as these tyres and expect to still have pace in the latter stages. And that's where Lewis Hamilton is struggling. He's not slow because he wasn't slow in Sector 1, nor will I engage all of this nonsense, this unreason about sabotage. Sabotage, in order to talk that, you would have to, this is what you'd have to put forth. This is what would need to stand up. That Mercedes give Lewis Hamilton a brilliant car all the way through FP1, FP2, FP3. And then all of a sudden, in Sector 2 or Sector 3 of Q3, that's when they're turning his engine down. That's when the tyres are of all of a sudden leading. Because he got it in Sector 1. Lewis Hamilton of 2007, 2008, 2018 hasn't gone anywhere because we saw him last race in Las Vegas in the bloody race. But where we see him is Sector 1, Sector 2 of qualifying, Q3. Where he goes away is Sector 3 because he's struggling to manage those tyres over the course of a qualifying lap. Yeah, once upon a time he was the tyre whisperer. His tyre management in the race is still brilliant, but that's a different thing altogether. Let's not conflate issues here. We are talking about hot laps in Q3, and there is something going on as far as the dynamic of that car, the tyres in conjunction with the aerodynamically sensitive, this spec of ground effect cars, and the way that Lewis is driving, super aggressive on the entry. And again, there is a tax to be paid as far as tyre management doing that sort of things. That means each and every single time Lewis is losing a lot of time towards the end of these laps. I will state for the avoidance of doubt where Lewis is losing the time. Nobody's going to tell me that Lewis is slow all of a sudden, not even the man himself. because that's disingenuous. Stop fishing for compliments, sir. This is big boy business, Formula One, is it not? Here's where the chap's losing the time. Bahrain final turn, quali, lost a ton of time, was on to be front row-ish. Canada, same thing, final turn. Australian Grand Prix, turn 13, 14, qualify. Chinese Grand Prix qualifying, turn 14, runs wide. Ascari chicane at Monza. USA Grand Prix, turn 12, misses the apex each and every single time. And then you get this Grand Prix when, again, on for a decent lap, but loses the bulk of his lap time versus George Russell, first of his name, in sector 3. There is something happening to Lewis Hamilton towards the end of these laps each and every single time that means he's losing all of his time in sector 3. It's sad, but he needs to fix for that. Listen, Mama Cameron's on the phone to me saying, listen, when he puts on the red overalls, this will be all different. No more sabotage from Mercedes. I think this is a Lewis Hamilton, this spec of car issue. And so it leaves me not sad, more disappointed when I hear Lewis Hamilton fishing for comments, trying to prod the interviewer to say, no, you're still fast, Lewis. No, listen, let's have a real open and honest conversation. Let's have a word with ourselves in the accountability mirror and fix for whatever's happening in the latter stages of these qualifying laps, because that, ladies and gentlemen, is Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton. And I don't think these performances are commensurate of that chap. Not of 2018 Sir Lewis Hamilton, Singapore settings. Not of 2008 Lewis Hamilton. Not of 2021 Lewis Hamilton, Brazil. This is a different dude. Somehow there is a Jekyll and Hyde thesis here that the wrong one, the Yang to the God tier Lewis Hamilton, always seems to show up in sector 3 of the quali laps. And it, ladies and gentlemen, is not good enough. I want to see Lewis, my driver for the avoidance of doubt, fighting at the front of the field each and every single time. And in order to do that now and definitely next year when he's in the car alongside modern day Jean Alesi, he'll need to change that. And soon. Ladies and gentlemen of the F1 jury, what are we doing here?